Hey everybody, Nick here, and today we're going to do a little disassembly and maintenance on this little guy here. This is the Benchmade axis lock flipper, the 300. And this is an interesting piece in a number of ways. The big thing I want to highlight right now is that at the moment, actually, the centering is maybe slightly favoring the clip side, but mostly the knife is in good shape. With a decent enough kind of free swingy action here. I think I can do better by cleaning it out a little bit, but we're actually, this seems like it's a good one. And is there any play? Maybe a little tiny bit. But so when we adjust this, we need to make sure it comes back to this state. Next thing to highlight. This is an axis lock knife, and you can do a full disassembly. But you end up taking off the scales. You end up dicking around with omega springs. You end up in just a world of hurt. And I don't need to be in a world of hurt. I've been there, I'm good, thank you very much. And so what we're going to do instead is, and this is certainly the coward's way out, but you know what, it's not the hill I want to die on today. So what I'm going to do is, instead of doing a full disassembly, I'm going to treat this little guy like an integral knife. I'm going to pop this pivot out of here, and then, pop the pivot screw that is, then I'm going to pop the pivot the rest of the way out of there. Just use this little guy here. What this has now done is it lets me pull the blade out of the knife itself and then remove the washers and get up there and clean everything out here, just without actually disassembling the handle portion. This works fine. By and large, if an axis lock knife is going to get dirty, this is the method it will get dirty in, is in this area around the pivot, etc. And so, yeah, this is generally a very efficient way to go about cleaning an axis lock knife. If you really get everything dirty, slimy, salty, something like that, you might end up needing to do a full disassembly where you take the handles apart, you remove the liners and everything, but most of the time this is just not needed. So that is just not needed, and the method I'm showing you here works fine. But if you want to see a full axis lock disassembly, some of my earlier axis lock videos, including, as I recall, the Benchmade Rift, is a good one to search for, because I actually did it well-ish, at least by my standards. But yeah, so what I'm doing here is just using this to kind of clean out the inside of the liners here. Next thing I'm going to do is use the Q-tip underneath there to just kind of wipe down the axis lock track here and remove any gunk that I happen to find. Clean things up a little bit. That's nice. Next step is going to be to, let's go ahead, and I'm using rubbing alcohol here, and if you're ever curious about any of the tools I use in a disassembly, go ahead and check my knife disassembly toolkit video. There I have a description of everything I'm using, as well as an Amazon store thing where you can buy most of it. Don't know what that is. Probably thread locker residue or something. Either way. Or is it a burr? I have no clue. Well, it is what it is what it is. It is what it is what it is. That's actually grammatical, which is weird. Anyways, moving along. English is basically freaking magic. Let's just be real. All right, so back at the ranch, let's go ahead and clean off these washers here. I'm just kind of wiping them off with this alcohol here. They're actually pretty clean, all told. And the knife itself is pretty clean. You can see there is some evidence of some gunkitude going on here, so I think we will actually have some improvement as I go through and do this process. But it wasn't like, oh my God, disgusting in there, in the sense that I've definitely had some, oh my God, disgusting knives on my table. Go ahead and take a little bit of this booze, clean the inside of this out. I'm going to go ahead and clean this area out. So one thing that is kind of interest here is that this is how an axis lock can be a flipper. As this knife is closed, this little lever here is what your finger presses. And so the axis lock actually, what happens is this little bar here, I'll simulate using this. As I press on this little bar will want to, by definition, rise up. And that provides, this little desire to rise up, provides a little bit of backwards force. And so when you're pressing this is what provides the detent, the force that holds the knife closed. And then the idea here is that once I finish pressing this will pop up And then when it pops, it will finally there will be enough forward momentum so the knife will deploy open cleanly. That's not universally the case. Unfortunately, axis lock flippers, at least this one sure isn't, they're not the way that a flipper should be done necessarily. But, it is an interesting approach. It's a nice idea. And I have no doubt that it could be done really well sometime in the future, maybe, with some tuning. But as it is, not so much. And then finally, I'm going to go ahead and apply a little bit of oil directly to the axis lock pin area here, as well as on the other side here, as well as onto the lock itself. Lock bar itself, that is. So, okay, next step here is going to be to take this guy and put it back together. So, a couple of things we got to talk about here. Step number freaking 1 is going to be to take some lubrication, and I'm going to lay it on a little thick here, even for my standards, that is. And I'm going to just go ahead and basically use this to attach the washers, that is. Is there a side that is more worn? Maybe this one. I don't know. I get the impression this knife probably wasn't carried all that much. By the way, did I thank my buddy Andrew for donating this guy to the channel? I don't think I did. But either way, so right now I have these two washers kind of in position on the knife here. The next step that I'm going to take here is to slide these washers and the blade into the handle here. And just my goal here is not necessarily, I won't be able to get everything in there because you're trying to get these washers into position and whatnot. My goal here is just to slide things far enough that I can get this little tool here through both the washers and the blade. And I have done that. So I now have sort of a pivot, a temporary pivot here, which is good. Next step is going to be to apply a little bit of oil to the, long-term pivot, which I'm just going to chase across the table while spraying it with oil. That works. And then my goal here is actually going to be to just replace this pivot here, my temporary one, with the actual pivot. The next question, though, unfortunately, the complication with this always is that the temporary pivot is not the same size as the real one. Come on. And so the washers will want to move around and whatnot. The other complication is that there is a D shape to the pivot in some position or another, and so I kind of need to make sure, there we go. So I was just rotating this pivot until I found the proper end of the D shape. Okay, next step here is going to be to put the washer into position here around the pivot. And so what I'm just kind of do here is, okay, in order to do this, you need to have the lock out of the way. Oh, there we go. So when I pulled the lock out of the way, it popped the rest of the way in, and that means it popped in via the washer. So that's good. Next thing I'm going to do is kind of pull the lock further back out of the way and then just sort of jiggle things a little bit with my goal of moving this blade until such a point that the pivot triumphantly snaps into position in the middle of the blade. Okay, we're snapping. Hey, we snapped. Okay, did you hear that? Was that triumphant? That was freaking triumphant. And then finally, the next step is going to be to use my little tool here and then just kind of move the washer so that the pivot can then triumphantly snap the rest of the way through. Oh, that was really freaking triumphant right there. So at this point in time, I want to double check that my washers are in position, that they didn't fall out or something. They are. Everything is functioning fine, which is good. And now, pardon me, I can just put the pivot in there. Oh, here's my pivot. Nice big T6 screw. T10. Slight difference. I've been dicking around with T6 all afternoon here. Not that I'm bitter. Me, bitter, never. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply some thread locker, blue Loctite, to match the knife, and slide that into the pivot itself. Now, the key is going to be tuning the pivot tightness, because right now, way too tight. And so the action is gritty and unfortunate. Like sand, it just gets everywhere. I hate sand. It's a Star Wars reference. Actually, that worked. Right now, I have things... Hey, nice. Do I really have things dialed in already? It's almost like I'm good at this or something. Weird. But okay, the reason I say that is that right now the lock is locking. There is zero blade play. The action is pretty fall-shutty, all told. And it actually deploys via flip. I am perfectly okay with this action. I am not, in fact, going to dick with it at all. I'm good. We are all set here. What I am going to do, however, is just apply a little bit of a thicker weight oil, in this case the 85 weight nano oil. I was using 10 weight previously, to the blade tang here. And the reason for that is just that it makes the lock bar slide a little bit more readily across the top of this guy. Yeah, that's actually a good action now. Huh, weird. Holy pocket decker, though. Alrighty, so there you go. That's the Benchmade 300, disassembled and maintained in record time. That was great. Hope this has been interesting to you, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.